Welcome to the Wealth Across Generations podcast. Hello, welcome back to the Wealth Across Generations podcast. I'll skip the usual intro for now because this is a part 2 of our discussion of Capstone and Cornerstone marriage.
So if you haven't heard part 1, I invite you to go back and listen to that first. However, you can still get the gist of what happened in part 1 in context and get a lot out of part 2 by just listening to that. It's up to you. Without further ado, let's begin.
In families with multi-generational wealth, or among the 1%, which is oddly enough only a net worth of about $5.8 million or more in the United States, you are more likely to find capstone marriages, so it makes sense to know how they work and how to do well at them. And that starts with knowing what you're looking for. At the risk of overgeneralization,
most of the talking head videos from single women that I see on social media
seem to want the benefits of capstone marriages and the equity of a cornerstone marriage. Conversely, men, especially young men, tend to like the kind of women who could easily end up in capstone marriages and aren't always prepared to make the sacrifices necessary for cornerstone marriages, even if that's what's necessary to make a marriage work in that chapter of their lives. Most men, myself included, would love to be able to provide for a woman as if she were a capstone spouse, but persistent economic realities make some cornerstone collaboration necessary. The first thing you need to get straight when learning about capstone and cornerstone marriages is to square this knowledge with what you are looking for. If you don't, you will end up with a Meghan Markle situation. A lot of people hate on Meghan Markle, but she probably just had cornerstone marriage expectations while marrying into the British royal family, and then, when those expectations weren't met, she tried to change circumstances with drastic actions in order to force reality to bend to her expectations. This created a lot of drama, unnecessary pain, and tarnished the image of the British monarchy as a result. The worst thing is to have the wrong expectations. There are plenty of women marrying into capstone marriages as capstone spouses expecting a 50-50 partnership, and that's not realistic. They didn't earn the money. They didn't make the sacrifices to build that success. They didn't participate in the family governance that led to multi-generational compound interest. They didn't form the family constitution, participate in management decisions of family enterprises, and cultivate the 9 types of capital in that family among all its members.
It's like asking me,
a man with no pilot's license, to drive Air Force One. If you're a woman marrying into a capstone marriage as the capstone spouse, know that you're not going to be steering your husband's family anywhere. Your job is to find or create your role within the family, which will be a composite of your own desires, your husband's vision for the role you will play in his life, and the family's gradually increasing trust in you over time. Meanwhile, there are men marrying into capstone marriages as capstone spouses as well. They should not expect to be running things just because they are a man. That's as ridiculous as Russian Queen Catherine the Great's lover ruling the kingdom just because he's with her. Not gonna happen. And it didn't. Men might be relied on a little more as capstone spouses than women are expected to, and will still gain respect by earning an income and developing their talents as well. People choose partners for a wide variety of reasons, and demonstrating an increasing capacity to provide is still valuable in women's marriage decisions, even if she doesn't necessarily need you for that. I don't feel much need to talk about knowing what you're looking for with cornerstone marriages. At the same time, there are people who think their problems will be solved and they can just relax after they get married, and nothing can be further from the truth. Even with a low-maintenance partner, it takes time, intentionality, and a certain amount of courage to run a household together with peace, win-win negotiation, and passion. Now, what about if you're seeking a spouse for your son or daughter, or you're helping them in that search at their request? How does cornerstone and capstone marriages factor into that search? Let's say you're a parent looking for a spouse for your son or daughter. For most of human history, love was a byproduct of marriage after the ceremony was over, gradually built up over years of shared history. In some places, Marriage was basically a business deal. The counsel and insistence of parents played a larger role in who we married, and in wealthy families, it may remain more relevant than it does among the poorer classes, because growth of a family over multiple generations requires more intentionality about choosing a partner. It was very common for parents to project their financial interests when recommending who their son or daughter marry. Parents of a daughter might push their daughter into a capstone marriage because they know their daughter can have children in a rich household and her security is more assured. This also enabled their own elder care. Parents of a son would be less likely to push him to be the capstone spouse of a woman, but they might in relation to the wife's family, because a well-connected family will open doors for their son to serve at higher levels in society. Today, having a realistic conversation and timely voluntary check-ins with your adult children as they get to about age 18 through 24 would be beneficial, if they are open to considering ideas. Talk to them, not just about the kind of person they like and the kind of person they imagine marrying, but also about whether or not they care about age differences, how much influence they'd like to have in their household, how much responsibility they want to have for the success or failure of their household, and how important it is to them whether or not they want to earn all of their financial freedom versus getting help along the way. Talk to them about their ambitions for what they want to do and who they want to be, and whether or not they stand a better chance of achieving those things by marrying into a capstone marriage or building them with a cornerstone marriage. Success, money, agency in your life, and marriage are interconnected. And the purpose of the conversation is to help your son or daughter realize those connections. As they become acquainted with those connections, they can talk with you about different types of marriages they see, either among famous people or people in your immediate social network. Make sure you check in with them about their desire for children in the future,
because that affects time horizons,
especially for women. After a few conversations about capstone and cornerstone marriages, your children will, over several months to several years, begin to realize their preferences. If your children start voicing partiality to a capstone marriage, keep your eye out for high-trust people you know who could benefit from that kind of partnership, and start guiding your adult child towards the skills and social circles that increase the likelihood of their meeting a suitable counterpart. If they prefer a cornerstone marriage, emphasize the skills and guide your adult child towards the social circles that have peers closer to their own age group to help facilitate that. First and foremost, remember, it's less about how do I help them find the right partner, and more, how do I help him or her become the type of person who will naturally attract and choose well. That being said, you can help your child find the actual person if they want your help with that. And as long as they have the choice to not marry someone they feel they could never truly love. Now, it sounds like I'm being a little bit more involved here than what you would see in normal partnership bonding over the last couple decades, and I am. Help your children? Yeah, I'm saying that. And there's a high number of reasons for that. One, there's a higher number of neurodivergent people. The number of people born with Asperger's or autism is a lot higher than it used to be. Then there's also issues like COVID, where schools were locked down for a year and a half. We don't know the full impact of what that would have on people as they grow up.
And then there's the political correctness environment. If you look at where people found their spouse years ago, it would be places like at church or at work. And now it seems like, especially at work, that's considered harassment to even try. And so the risk of failure for many people is just too high to seek a spouse in those environments. And they need somebody other than themselves representing their interests in order to seek out opportunities without being punished too hard for failure. And in times of civilizational collapse or decline, the battle between the sexes gets a little bit more intense. People have their guard up, and we're in a time right now where that's definitely the case. And having someone else who can represent your own interests is very valuable. And at this time, children need their parents, they need matchmakers, they need coaches, and they need trusted advisors more than ever before.
And also, people's social circles are more myopic now. They're Social circles are more about online communities, and it's a lot harder to connect and get on the rails of relationship if you're a digital native, like Gen Z and even some millennials. So, let's talk about getting into a cornerstone marriage. Now, first off, every marriage relies on similar family wealth values. For instance, in episode 7, we talked about the 3 legs of trust. In any marriage, that's important. Then there's a respect for timeless principles or biblical principles. Then there's the ability to express real love instead of engaging in what author Greg Beyer calls getting and protecting behaviors. And finally, vulnerability, and one of the Allen family values, supportiveness. Those values are necessary in every marriage. Now let's get into what's necessary for a cornerstone marriage. In addition to everything I mentioned earlier, you, the potential cornerstone spouse, are seeking to develop the following values: diligence, responsibility, believing yourself to be a first-generation wealth creator and living with a pioneer spirit, win-win thinking, belief in the joy that comes from achieving common goals, and forgiveness. And these skills will help you also. You'll need the ability to manage and process your own emotions, the ability to notice the thought patterns in yourself and others, an internal locus of control, meaning that you believe the actions you take play a major role in the kind of outcome you get in life and where you go. Then there's the ability to accept when you have made mistakes. There's a healthy relationship to risk, and finally, delayal of gratification. I'm not going to get into a big coaching plan on how to develop these. It would make the podcast episode too long, so instead, I'm going to reference something called Pearson's Law, which states this: that which is measured improves. That which is measured and reported improves exponentially. People like the theologian Jonathan Edwards and founding father Benjamin Franklin went through phases where they held themselves accountable by writing down how they did on their own personal values each day. Where will you be in 6 months if you do the same, with the help of parents, friends, or a coach? Now, what about a capstone marriage? If you're aiming to be a capstone spouse, these values will be more important. Long-term thinking, respect and honor for the spouse and their family, humility, forgiveness, obedience. Ooh, yes, I said it. The high-earning spouse is helping you move years ahead on the marathon of life at warp speed, often doing so at their own expense. He, or she sometimes, who pays the piper, calls the tune, at least 51% of the time. Next is creativity. You may not be earning most of the income, but you have the opportunity to make the house feel more like a home, to make sure events run smoothly, to be the peacemaker in the house, and use your mental labor to show love and support for the other members of your family. This includes expressing your love for your husband or wife and others that may be a bit more detailed and bespoke than someone busy carrying half or more of the family's burdens could ever hope to manage. And learning. Remember, you have time to develop your mind. Listen to podcasts like this one. Be a coach to your children. I didn't put that down in Cornerstone Marriages, even though it's just as important there, because as a capstone spouse, you can fit regular time in for things like this. That was values. Let's talk about skills for capstone marriages. If you're an aspiring capstone spouse, what you're going to need is social skills. And the main goal of social skills is not to compete with other spouses. The goal of social skills is to reflect the best image of your spouse to the public as possible, even when they don't deserve it. In fact, sometimes especially when they don't deserve it. Men and women will make decisions about your spouse based on how you act and appear, and that affects you. And if this doesn't worry you at all or excites you too much, you may want to get a little more of the opposite. This is a job, although sometimes it can be a fun and glamorous one. Then we have delay of gratification. I listed that in Cornerstone marriages too, but put it higher here. You may have the optionality to get anything you want within reason, but don't take this as a time to get everything you want at once. Remember, this feeds into long-term thinking for yourself and your new family. Another skill is healthy boundaries with clear communication. You need the ability to speak up when something is very important to you and stand your ground on it. High-earning partners often have a habit of command and are used to getting what they want. The sheer momentum can bowl over people with no boundaries until they resent their spouses, even in otherwise great circumstances. After social skills, delay of gratification, and healthy boundaries with clear communication, we have the ability to notice the thought patterns in yourself and others. And this was mentioned earlier in Cornerstone marriages, but multiply this times like 5 compared to the Cornerstone partner, as the social circles of more established families tend to require more finesse. Then there's the ability to manage and process your own emotions, and the ability to choose your story. Choosing your story is not just choosing the golden thread that defines where your life is going, it's also about interpreting events that even seem bad. For example, a wife can see her husband come in late from work multiple days in a row and tell a story that he doesn't care about her. Or she can tell a story that he's working hard on his mission because he wants to be a good provider and solve an important problem in the world. This is a golden thread. What about interpreting individual events? Imagine you twist your ankle, like I did in January. Ooh, it was bad. Took months to recover, but I had a choice. I could yell and complain that I was crippled, or choose counterfacts that were helpful. For example, I twisted my ankle in the perfect place to twist your ankle, close to home. If it were any closer to home, I would have fallen down the stairs. If I were further ahead, I would have twisted my ankle in the street, and I would have fallen into traffic. Thank God I twisted my ankle in the perfect spot. The ability to choose your story is important, because if you spend a lot of time at home, a lot of time involved in status games, social media, and complaining, you have the ability to make a hell out of heaven, which kills any temptation people would have to invest in you. Another skill is beauty. For women, this is usually the optimizing of youth, fitness, and fertility, and presenting these aspects of yourself in socially and situationally appropriate ways. For men, it's usually physical strength and being well-groomed. After that, learn how to communicate well. I talked about this earlier with boundaries, but now we're going to be a little bit more broad. Aim to be precise in your language, but also how to be honest and with compassion. Avoid swearing in most cases. Develop a voice that sounds enjoyable to listen to. That's probably the most important, as sad as that sounds. Using subtext and plausible deniability will become more important as well, unfortunately. But lean on subtext as a listening and speaking skill, so you can say what you need to say in a way that doesn't directly confront or challenge people looking for a fight. Learn plausible deniability more as a receptive listening skill than a productive speaking skill. You'll better recognize opportunities, threats, and other signals as you get better at picking these things up. Nonverbal communication is also more important, both in terms of how people posture and also what they wear, as fashion choices are statements at higher social circles more than they are about convenience or necessity. 3 more, and one of them is how to listen. I almost wrote how to shut up. What I really mean is that most of the people around you have momentum in your new family and high levels of agency and ownership in what is going on. Listen first. It's okay to ask some questions and offer to help where you can, but it's not your job to shame people or tell them how to do things. Your next skill is how to be interested in other people's desires and life stories. This will help you discover your role, build trust in the spouse's family, and widen your social circle in a way that makes you an asset. And finally, cheerleading, emotionally. Let me explain. I'm not saying to be a yes person and signal enthusiastic approval for ideas you think are morally wrong or counterproductive. But assume the best in your spouse. Err on the side of confidence in them. Talking to parents of aspiring capstone spouses, your adult child's social environment needs to change too. It's less about youth groups and parties and more about entrepreneur groups, volunteering groups, academic and professional circles, and high-discipline hobbies like endurance sports, climbing gyms, music-making communities, etc. Higher-earning capstone partners appreciate people who have discipline and a sense of purpose. If you're aiming to be the high-earning capstone earner in the marriage, you require most of the cornerstone skills, plus a little more stoicism. We've talked about the skills people need to learn. Now, what would put a capstone marriage on the rocks? What would make it in danger of divorce? Or for that matter, what would make it in danger of being a marriage that you feel stuck in or that makes you feel alone? Because those are just as terrible outcomes as divorce. What makes that happen? Assuming you picked a good partner, let's say you're the high-earning partner in this marriage. If the high-earning partner doesn't give space for their capstone spouse to define their own role and develop into the type of person they want to be, no amount of resources will break the barrier you've created. It's okay, as the high-earning partner, to have standards, communicate them, and ask for them. It's even okay to challenge when expectations have been given but ignored or neglected. But remember that even a capstone spouse who has more time and, in theory, more bandwidth to fulfill different roles in your life, that doesn't mean they are going to perform at 100%, or that you should withdraw your love from them just because you aren't getting your way. Regardless of power disparities in a relationship, if both partners aren't getting their way often enough, one will leave sooner or later. A loss of fortune could sometimes wreck a capstone marriage, either because the higher-earning spouse feels they failed their partner, or the high-earning spouse believes they don't deserve their capstone spouse anymore, or they may assume the capstone spouse will leave them, and because of the high-earning partner's attachment style, they will choose to leave their capstone spouse first as a way of making it hurt less. Also, if the capstone spouse wasn't prepared for how they will act in this situation and wasn't committed to keeping the marriage together, they might leave of their own choice. Then, of course, there's the predictable abuse and addiction risks, but in a wealthier household, there's usually a bit more that can be invested in treatment and rehabilitation. Capstone spouses can get greedy and entitled. They can also act in ways that are shameful or disrespectful to their spouse, creating an effect of personal humiliation or a public loss of reputation for the wealthier spouse and their family. A capstone spouse can try to take control away from their partner or their partner's family, again creating a Meghan Markle situation. Nobody wants to marry someone like that. A capstone spouse can also wreck the marriage by a dead bedroom. The high-earning partner is not financing another grown adult's life just so he or she can have a cold roommate. If a dead bedroom persists too long, a separation may come about, or something worse. Finally, infidelity is also a big problem. The capstone spouse usually has less room to be unfaithful. Meanwhile, though this isn't equitable at all, a high-earning spouse can be harmed by committing infidelity, but if they're in a position where they have plenty of people willing to marry them if they became available again, and they act with discretion, they might be able to hold on to marriage, but only as a superficial legal structure. However, that superficial structure will be a painful and increasingly cold place to be for both parties. Now, what would make a cornerstone marriage in trouble? Cornerstone marriages fall apart often because of money, usually the not enough money problems.
And money is often a measure of a person's choices. And if the poverty is happening because of consistently poor choices, then that's going to create a whole lot more resentment than simply having poor circumstances.
They fall apart because of dead bedrooms or infidelity, and they fall apart because of too much stress, one way or the other. They can also fall apart because of addiction or abuse. All these things, in part, can be symptoms of a poor relationship with God, but even sincere Christians can struggle with these things. Both cornerstone and capstone marriages can get in trouble when a couple spends decades on their careers or kids only to find their partners have changed too much and feel that they are next to strangers by the time they've retired or their kids are away from home. Having supportive family members nearby to sometimes take the kids for a day trip or sleepover is very helpful, and building a community where your family can feel safe outside the house is important to lowering stress. Our last point focuses on trust. How do we have high trust, regardless of the kind of marriage we have? To have high trust in a cornerstone marriage, you need to have each other's best interest in mind, have integrity, and get the job done for each other, just like you do for a capstone marriage. The difference lies in what it means to get the job done. Cornerstone marriages are about being self-sacrificing enough so that both partners can sustainably build something together. It is about not being jealous or insecure when the earning power fluctuates between either party. It's about being clear on your goals and values and moving in the same direction for decades. It requires enough balance to be able to enjoy life here and there while still delivering on the necessities like saving and investing and raising a family. Finally, it's about keeping the intimacy and connection close enough throughout the difficult times that by the time the both of you get to the other side, you still know, like, and trust each other. This may require you to go slower, and that's okay. Unless the marriage is seriously unhealthy, the only thing slower than traveling slowly is divorcing and starting again. With capstone marriages, the capstone spouse can get the job done and have their partners and partners' families' best interest in mind by realizing they are joining a team that has already gained momentum. Their goal should be to find their role within the family and their partner's life, understand what the deal is, and provide those essentials for which the partner married them. Meanwhile, they should educate themselves and do whatever they can to make that forward momentum faster, more enjoyable, or less chaotic. They should avoid the temptation to try and steer their spouse or family, yet at the same time don't be a pet and take zero responsibility either. If you as a capstone spouse are doing a great job, the amount of responsibility and agency you have within the family will go up over time. Clear communication and strong but reasonable boundaries are necessary so you don't lose yourself in marrying not just into the life of an older partner, but into a wealthy family as an institution. The higher earning spouse, on the other hand, needs to realize that even though they may have an advantage in negotiations, power, resources, experience, or opportunity, to always use those advantages to benefit their capstone spouse rather than using them as levers to control their partner. In many cases, prenuptial agreements are necessary, not only to protect employees and other family members who may be dependent on the assets the high-earning spouse has acquired, but also to preserve the high-earning spouse's place in the marathon of life, where financial independence is a key milestone. The high-earning spouse should be clear on what role they think their spouse should be able to play in their relationship as wife, mother, husband, father, partner, lover, etc., while understanding that even if the spouse has no other immediate obligations, the spouse is not a robot and will not be able to do things 100% all the time. They should also make it clear what should happen if a reversal of fortune should make them less rich, and what both the high-earning spouse and the capstone partner plans to do if that should happen. So let's get into your family wealth group for question time. This group can be your spouse, parents, siblings, adult children, or any high-trust family member or friend with whom you listen to this podcast or have these types of conversations with. Share this podcast and listen together, or listen separately and reunite for the questions. You can ask any questions you want, but some excellent places to start are: Question 1. What has worked well for you if you are in a cornerstone marriage, or for the cornerstone marriages of people you know? 2. If you have a capstone marriage, or know people in a capstone marriage, what principles or lessons could be helpful for that dynamic? 3. Why do you think some cornerstone marriages don't do well? What about capstone marriages? Questions 4 through 6 are for elders or anybody. So question 4 is, what kind of marriage was your marriage? Cornerstone or capstone? What did you like or not like about that arrangement compared to the alternatives? Question 5. If you found out your adult child would thrive best in a capstone marriage, how could you help them get into a good one? Question 6. If you found out your adult child would thrive best in a cornerstone marriage, how could you help them get into a good one? Question 7 is for friends. If you noticed a couple that was close to you having trouble, and they asked for your advice, how would this podcast and the previous one, part 1, play a role in the questions you would ask? Question 8 is for single people looking for marriage. How does this podcast help you in your search for a marriage partner? And finally, question 9, what do all marriages need in order to thrive over multiple decades? For a list of these questions typed out, previous referenced episodes, GPT prompts, extended interview content for when I have guests, and book references, subscribe to the Substack. You can also leave comments there for other listeners, and it's a great way to support the show. You can also subscribe, review, and keep listening with your family wealth group on the platform you discovered this podcast. By listening, you are choosing to avoid years of unnecessary pain and improve your decision-making alongside me over the course of the next century. I cannot thank you enough. And whether you're satisfied in a cornerstone marriage, living your best capstone marriage life, or wandering amongst the weeds of the dating world, remember, the struggles you face today, you not only can solve, but you can solve for the generations that come after you. I'll see you in the next episode.